This moment right here provides a fundamental difference between the mindset of the people in the streets of Hong Kong and those managing, or at least attempting to manage, the people of Hong Kong. For the unfamiliar, what is being torn down is a facial recognition camera, a technology that has advanced leaps and bounds in the last few years due to the unparalleled groundswell of funding the Chinese government has placed in its industry. No more can one enter their designated social housing without being greeted by a network of cameras that know exactly who and where the person residing in that complex is. No more can one jaywalk without it immediately affecting the social credit score, something almost all of you watching this video have probably done at least once in your life if you grew up poor in America like I did, that they are dependent on against the tide of public shaming. Indeed, China's rising authoritarianism not only steps into the realm of privacy denial, a basic human right, but also micromanages some of the most commonplace actions one can partake in on the street or outside of the home through a highly sophisticated web of surveillance. It is not shocking, then, that one of the same engineers responsible for the result of that government's investments told a Vice interviewer without a hint of irony that the facial recognition and tracking technology is not only reminiscent of the dystopian horror show Black Mirror, but is poised to develop into something that mimics it entirely. This is a problem. It's a problem for me because I know what it would feel like for it to be a problem for you. Yes, the movement for Hong Kong's autonomy is not made entirely of freedom-oriented leftists who want to oppose the boot of right-wing neoliberalism that has plagued Hong Kong since colonization into the PRC-dominated era. But those right-wingers, those libertarians, and those shouting America in the same crowds, while not motivated ideologically by the persistence of neoliberalism, are nonetheless fighting because of the effects it has had on the population. Not only is Hong Kong consistently ranked as the freest market in the world by the same ghouls who think abolishing the minimum wage would do a great deal for the economy, it is also a region in which over 200,000 people are living in cage homes, what I would refer to as effective homelessness. So little space to live in that the average worker, who only wants the time it would take to refresh themselves before toiling away all over again, cannot properly sleep due to the loudness of the family living in a similarly constrained prison-esque cage next door. Regardless of ideology, the effect of alienation on the broader population is the same. Separatism is not motivated by some purely right-wing American-operated color revolutionary ideology. It is motivated by the staunch economic reality that has left much of Hong Kong destitute and suffering. When you are that desperate, right and left, despite their differences on where the country should be after the revolution, both are in agreement that there must be a revolution. The chance for structural change to be made can only come into being if the governing forces are ousted. Those forces, aligned with Beijing, are opposed by Washington for imperialist and expansionist reasons, competition between two global powers, but they are opposed by the people for the economic and social strain that the Beijing-aligned faction has allowed for and the freedoms they are ever so often laying waste to. I, for one, would not want my face immediately connected to a database designed to track my movements and police my actions, much less live in a country where perhaps my own family are deteriorating from living in literal cages as billionaires rank in profits. Yes, the end result of a hypothetical revolution in Hong Kong is desired by the American elite tied to the Hong Kong right, which America has actively funded in these protests. But the similarity and desire of an end result does not necessarily mean that it will be the only result. It simply means that multiple sides of the aisle share a goal, albeit for different reasons. Tactical unity and strategic partnerships do not mean the two sides stay together after after that goal has been met. It means once the goal is met, the floor is finally open to point your guns back at one another. Many of the same people criticizing the groups involved in these protests wouldn't bat an eye before mentioning the heroism of the Yellow Vests, despite the fact that the Yellow Vests employ eerily similar tactics with a broad coalition of left and right-wingers. When the French do it, it's tactical unity for a shared goal. When the Chinese do it, it's working with a subversive American far-right group who must be stopped for their lack of purity. Are we seeing a pattern here? One of the most bizarre instances of self-delusion from people defending China's cracking down on Hong Kong in their infinite stride of mental gymnastics is that Hong Kong is China, as if it weren't obvious that people who speak Chinese and live smack dab in the middle of East Asia weren't in China. Hong Kong was stolen by the British Empire hundreds of years ago, against the Chinese people's will, to the point where it could only be taken by getting the population hooked on opium. Until 1997, when it was given back to China, British rule played a decisive role in the lives of an entirely new set of Chinese people who, unlike their communist compatriots, were brought up not as pieces of a larger collective, but as individuals acting autonomously within a collective. The Opium Wars played a vital role in this collectivist attitude within the mainland, because when you are invaded, you have to rely on the strength of a government, the strength of an emperor whose legitimacy only goes as far as the people under them allow. This gave way to the Chinese socialism of yesterday and the Chinese corporatism of today, both resolutely remaining within the tradition of conformity and a larger collective will overriding the individual. It is here that the divide between those in the mainland and those in Hong Kong is made entirely clear, as Chinese media portrays the protesters as defiant children acting up against the family unit of China. The Hong Kong media portrays them as impressionistic heroes displaying the weight of individuality against an oppressive system. Who is to say either one is correct? Who is to say the majority, who cannot fit themselves within this separate Chinese culture due to the influence of colonization, should be denied their autonomy and their will because of some vague idea of one China, reaching back to a culture that is practically non-existent in Hong Kong today? After all, it is not my land, it is the majority's. You could easily compare this to Northern Ireland, which you could easily say is a part of Ireland as well. But the people in Northern Ireland, while influenced by and subverted by the religious divisions manufactured by the Thatcher government and previous governments, are nonetheless a result of the people's will. If the majority of those in the North wanted to reunite, it would have been done by now. It does not matter how much what is traditionally understood to be Ireland has been torn apart by a foreign puppet master sowing dissent, when at the end of the day it is the responsibility of those who reside in Northern Ireland to choose the country and culture they want to be in. The choice has been made, stamped with the birthmark of a country culturally and economically English. After that culture has persisted for so long, are we really going to deny the autonomy and opinions of those in the North when they do not see themselves as the Irish people seeking their secession? Hong Kong is China. That shouldn't matter in the face of state violence reinforcing poverty and poverty reinforcing violence in the people's everyday lives. That shouldn't matter in the face of freedom of expression and the people's right to privacy being trampled on by the Chinese billionaire class, but should instead be decided upon by the will of a people operating on a set of assumptions firmly outside of those in the mainland, the majority of Hong Kong. The land belongs to the majority, and the majority of Hong Kong, in the cultural sense of the word, are not Chinese. Free Hong Kong.